This video is brought to you by Midway USA. Support the channel by choosing Midway for your shooting and outdoor supplies.
So this is my SIG 556. The SIG 556 was an American copy of the SG 551. A lot of times it gets a lot of hate because while they copied it and tried to adopt it to the local market, it dropped off a lot of features that people wanted. But I've always known that the core concept of it's actually a decent clone of the SIG SG 551, 550. It just needed some help. So here I gave it a little bit of help. I gave it the proper Swiss sights. These are not the MFI sights. More on that in the video. Please note I do not like the MFI sights. I have the B&T copy rail. I have the Swiss pistol grips that I put on here and a true Swiss side folding stock. Now, since it is a long action gas system with a charging handle mounted to the bulk carrier group feeding from Stanag magazines rather than the Swiss style of rock and locks, I felt like it was sufficiently close enough to the Swedish AK5 series of rifle. This is an FNC, not an AK5. Feeding from the Stanag magazine, long gas piston system, and a charging handle attached to the bolt, that I would give it a nice homage to the Swedish AK5, which you can see right here, with a lovely Swedish AK5 green, since the operating system is the same. But that's a lot of talking. We had to explain exactly what this amalgamation was because this does not look like the trash as you see right here. How does it shoot? Let's find out. Now I've got to thank our gunsmith Mike for helping me with some gunsmithing work right here. These sights, these are not the MFI sights. These are true Swiss sights that he had welded on with a lovely coat to turn out, we say, the SIG 551 we have at home, or you could say the Swedish AK5 that we have at home. So let's see.
Impact. Impact. 1 at 200. Dead center. Okay. All right, 250. Impacts just a couple inches low of center. Same spot.
Alright, so that was using the tip of the chevron aiming at the neck.
300. I think that just came in at a low. Dead center. Yeah, okay. Second shot there was just on the slightly low of center.
Okay.
Okay, 350. Okay. That was an impact, but it was on the low line of the plate. You need to give it another 6 inches. Okay, impact, and that's neutralized. Elevation, perfect, corrected, right edge of the plate.
All right, so one thing about the SIG 556 is they have a much lighter barrel than the Swiss rifles do, and I'm actually seeing quite a bit of mirage. The system itself runs hot to begin with, much like many long stroke type systems. Think in mind an AK, how hot they run. I'm starting to get some mirage through even a 4x scope.
400.
400.
Okay, that was an impact. Elevation is good, just on the left edge. Impact. Okay, 450. Impact. Just off the left edge. Impact.
Nice.
500. Impact, dead center. Impact.
Nice.
Good run, dude. Good run.
That was good,
indeed.
clear, good, clear. I think that is sub 20. Very respectable run. How many did I miss? Like 3?
I think, yeah, the one at the 300 that you sent just low, and the windage miss at 450.
Yeah, okay.
2 misses?
Yeah, so really not bad concerning that I'm using ball ammunition too. So this is not match ammo or anything.
Yeah.
Basically the same lot of ammunition that we shot the Swiss SIGs with. And on paper, same thing this compared to a lot of the Swiss SIGs. On paper, it may not print like super tight groupings, but Josh, I mean, very respectable from a practical course perspective, especially unlike the Swiss SIGs, I'm able to run an ACOG on top.
Yeah. And I do think that the conditions right now are like absolutely optimal. It's like beautiful. We're not super warm. We're not cold. Mild wind only.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really nice lighting even. Like everything is optimal right now. But yeah, I mean, it's still, that was a very, very good run.
Yeah, I will say the one thing I did see a good bit of heat signature from the scope. I think this is something that we observed with the SG 550 when we did the Speedway course on the 550 as well. The 550, when I finished it on the Speedway course, the entire handguard was spewing with smoke. So the systems run hot. That's just by nature of the design how it is. You could see here the SIG design, and this is coming from the Swiss SIG design, injecting into the American, let's say, copy. They do have the gas tube shielded fairly well. So I think there must have been a design, some conscious design that was there to shield some of the heat. But regardless, I think there's a lot to talk about because this particular rifle, as you know, is very, I don't know if controversial is the right word. It gets shat upon quite a bit in America. But I don't know if it's warranted that, just purely based on today's observation and running this for a while. But I suppose that's good for the debrief for us to get back to. We'll see you guys there. Well, hello there. I was only at the local cave searching for a delicious vintage. I hope you're enjoying the show thus far. Shows like this, they're made possible by Slate Black Industries. But more importantly, we have the support of the patrons of Patreon. That's right, this magnificent group of men and women. They support us financially, intellectually, more importantly, emotionally. So today, I'd like to invite you. Come, join us, become one of us. Together, we could discover the intricacies of firearms development. But if not, that's okay. We'd be just as happy to hear from you in the comment section below. But for now, let's get on with it.
Welcome back for the debrief of another phenomenal run put up by a SIG pattern rifle. But Henry, is it SIG or SIG?
This is SIG Sauer, or AKA back in the day, SIG Arms USA. The SIG 556, not SG 551, 550, 552, or 553. It is the SIG 556, aka the SIG SG55X that we in America have at home. Or, particularly in this pattern, this is the AK5 that we have at home. AK5 being the Swedish FNC patterned assault rifle in the lovely green coat that it has.
Is everybody following along?
Yes, are you confused yet? But at the core, this is the older version of the SIG 556 that SIG Arms USA back in the, I think, 2008 timeframe up until 2015 or 2017, they were selling these. And yeah,
Henry, why don't you walk us through some of the categorical differences, say, between this particular rifle and maybe the old or correct sort of like original SG pattern rifles?
So like if we were to say a SG551 that we have right here, what are the differences between the two? Oh, I'm glad you asked. So the SIG 556 and the SG 551 are similar but different. Same but different. The same thing that we talked about before. The operating system, the core design elements are very similar. Now, this one has some things that I've returned it back to the Swiss standard. But the core operating system is the long stroke gas piston system, similar to the Kalashnikov. 3 or 2 lug rotating bolt. The same stamp sheet metal receiver as well. The upper and the lowers are also dual pins, so you can crank it open, crack it open, and pull all the guts out. The bolts, the pistons, the gas components are all interchangeable. The sights are interchangeable to a certain extent. The front sights are interchangeable. We'll get into that in a bit. But the magazines are not. And some things, the stocks for this particular version are interchangeable. And in fact, this one has a Swiss stock on it. And these two have the same grips, but this has to be, the American one has to be fitted with the Swiss grips if you so choose to have those. So it can use a lot of the same parts. I would say like 60% of the parts can be interchanged. So for someone who is from, let's say, the Swiss Armed Forces, if they were to pick one of these up, outside of the sights being different, this one has Swiss sights, but originally they don't come with the Swiss sights. Outside of the sights being different, probably you would have some type of an optic on this because the Americans made it optic ready. A Swiss person who is used to the 550 should be able to use this very easily. Now, in this particular form, if we're looking at it, this has a 16-inch barrel with a muzzle device on it. So as a pattern, this would be particularly close to the SG551 LB long barrel version. And particularly the way we've outfitted this one in running it with an ACOG, it would actually be close to what the French Marine Commandos or Naval Commandos would be running, where they use a 551 LB with an ACOG patterned optic as their main arm. And of course, the Swiss full straight stock. So multiple homages with this, but of course, this is not an original SIG 556 per se. I've asked, if you couldn't tell, I've asked our gunsmith Mike to do a few alterations to the original American SIG 556.
If you weren't confused previously, now Henry has shown you this SIG 556, which is actually just also not a SIG 556 anymore.
It's the AK5 we have at home. Now,
How are you going to title this video?
I don't know. Henry's SIG 556, I guess.
So now, if I recall, the SIG 556 generally carries with it like a relatively negative connotation within, I don't know, most social media circles, most forums. Like there's usually like a general negativity surrounding it. I think that's fair. Is that a fair
that's
representation?
That's very accurate on the representation of this particular rifle. In fact, I also held a lot of those views as I was getting into the firearms world as well, because I think what happened. So if we were to look back at the history of SIG Arms USA, they started off as an import firm. So they would pull a lot of German P226 type rifles and bring them to America. But to a smaller extent, to a much lesser extent, they would also bring SG 551s into the States. And so in the 2000s, they started to tool up and make their own stuff. One pistol, I don't know if you remember the SIG Pro, the SP 2022, I think. I forget what it was. It's the SIG Pro series. It's like a watered down P226 that was available to the market. It was not particularly commercially successful, but it had, some footprint in the market. But it was a made in America SIG. And in a similar boat, this was similar to that. They basically took the original designs and tried to adapt it to the home market, to the American market that they were trying to talk to or sell to.
Things like the Stanag Mag.
Yes, the magazine availability of the M16 magazines. I mean, anyone in their right mind, if they are trying to sell any firearm these days, if they don't want to mess with a giant liability on reliability issues and have to manufacture stateside, they would choose a Stanag magazine. It is a standard. It is a NATO standard at this point. And so if you look at the later on, like CZ's Bren series, the Bren 1, Bren 2, the not the G36, the HK416, obviously, the SA80s, all of those things use the Stanag magazine. Reason being, that's one less reliability issue you would have to face and one less logistical issue you would have to face if you wanted a commercial success of a rifle. Logically, it makes sense. It's like making a firearm that takes Glock mags these days. Logically, it makes sense. But that was one of the major revolting talking points for the market in America, because when people saw that they were making a 55X series pattern, they didn't want something like this. They wanted this. This is what they wanted. They wanted the gray receiver. They wanted the original Swiss magazines. They wanted the green furniture. They wanted the Swiss sights and the Swiss diopter rear sights, and of course the Swiss stock and everything. So when SIG Arms USA started bringing it to America, they were trying to bring an accurate, reliable, and intuitively functioning rifle and adapt it to the American market. I think they made a really good attempt. Now, however, some of the execution was so-so.
Would you say that the general negative connotation that surrounds this rifle is then twofold? The first being people were wanting a true like SG 55X clone, and that's not what they were given.
Yeah.
And on top of that, just like most companies who release new firearms into the market, there's a evaluation period where like things get looked at, worked on, and improved as the company attempts to scale, grow, manage production lines, potentially outsources some work, all of the things you just described. And as a result, you're starting from a negative place because people expected a clone, they didn't get it, and then on top of that, this thing wasn't lights out, a total banger perfect on the first attempt, in spite of the fact that it was actually halfway decent. And so as a result, people just went, yeah, but no.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, because the way this came, I did switch some of the things out. Like the furniture was switched out. The rail, of course, this is a 6-hour made rail. I think this is a copy of the B&T rail that's out there. So this is a good copy of that rail. It's very sturdy. Side note, the top of this rail is the flimsy side. So if you're mounting IRs, this has to be a side-mounted IR system. Pro tip for you guys out there.
Not the best. Yeah.
Let's backtrack this a little bit. What are the big criticisms that they yelled at for SIG when you outline, one, that people wanted the clone correct Swiss SIG, and two, that they wanted quality on top of that, because that's what the SIGs are known for in the world, right? Mm-hmm. The furniture, they started stripping the furniture for cheaper items, and that really just kind of killed it before it became something big. People would buy them, and the first thing they would do was strip out the furniture and swap it out for Magpul stuff. Yeah. Because it's just, they did not like it. The grips actually do not, you cannot use an AR-15 grip on it, so you're stuck with whatever it is. Or you take your time to fit a Swiss grip onto it. The original handguard with the fish gills was kind of one of the most hated items in the collector's market. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the biggest problems that they ran into that they did was to strip the Swiss sights off of the otherwise amazing platform. Because standalone, these rifles, if you just had the Swiss sights on these, like this one, they're amazing. They are a standalone, like 1990s wonder of a rifle. It will work through a lot of requirements, like 80-90% of the requirements that you need it for a rifle of that era. And they stripped those out, and they added these, like, the ones that I had on there, they're taller when they came. And the rear drum sight is just not the same. It's also like, it just kind of flops around. But they did put a pick rail on top and extend it all the way to the end. I think the intention was that the American market was going to drop optics on it anyways. So why would you spend the time in making these sights that cost a lot for the rifle system? But there was also an aesthetic portion of these sights that people really enjoyed, with the rifle. Now let's talk sights real quick. These are true Swiss SG551 sights that have had our gunsmith Mike reinstall back onto the SIG 556. The reason for that is because these are some of the most excellent iron sights you could find from a late Cold War rifle. Now, SIG USA, 6 Hour USA, originally when they released these, they had these horrible crackerjack cereal box looking iron sights that either bolted on right here. They just did not work very, very well. They sort of worked, just not very well. They've always had in mind that the end user was going to use optics anyway, so that the iron sights were just not a huge focus for that. There is a company called MFI that makes a top rail that bolts on, and they have rear sights that almost look like the Swiss sights. But I cannot recommend against buying them enough because, well, let's read it off of here. This is off of their site. I designed these to look like the original SIG PE90 SIG SG551 rear diopter sights that were welded onto the receivers, blah, 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 blah. Not exact copies of the original. As I am not a huge believer in the accuracy of 223 556 cartridges, so I only fully tested the number 1 position at 100 meters. The number 2, 3, 4 designations may or may not be applicable. I did position the holes in the correct location, blah, 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 blah. He did not design these sights to actually work. They are cosmetic sights. When you look at the internal mechanism, they don't click. They don't hold in place. There's no detent holding them in place. They are essentially airsoft sights. Save your time, save your money, get some real SIG sights, have Mike weld them onto your SIG 556, and be better than that. Anyways, let's get back to the show. in a nutshell, like stuff like that is just vulturing on a market that wanted this to be an original Swiss rifle. And guys would go out and pay a lot of money for these sights that honestly had the quality of airsoft sights. And it just doesn't do the same job, you know? And that was kind of the story of the SIG 556. At the core, it's a really nice performing rifle, but a lot of the features, a lot of the accessories, a lot of the little small ancillary things that surround it really missed the mark. So you had a really good base rifle. You had a solid attempt into making the magazine, or might I say, SIG USA tried really hard to improve the magazine for the American market and using SIG. And even with that, with the failures of the furniture design, with the failure of the sighting system options for customers out there, with a strange approach to marketing because they were trying to surpass the AR, but these things are front heavy. Like, that's one thing you are not going to fight the AR on. The AR is exceedingly lightweight in the front. But it just really failed to grow in a lot of the same direction that the AR-15 did.
It's probably a fair assessment. But obviously, as you can see, like the lack of success in a commercial marketplace also does not a bad rifle make.
Yeah.
And you basically cleared the course with 55 grain ball ammo with only 2 misses. Mm-hmm. Which is, again, up there with some of the best performers on the entire course.
The Block 2 with an ACOG was similar to that, except that was using 77s.
Granted, true. And granted, the weather conditions on the day we shot the SIG were very pleasant.
Right.
Everything was very nice. Things were going right, But nonetheless, these are asterisks and caveats, but the rifle performed the way the rifle performed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that in mind, there was one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that was, you made some comments that the system runs hot.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, you were getting some decent amount of mirage coming off of the handguard and into the actual optic, into the ACOG.
Mm-hmm.
Now, certainly, in my experience, that is an exacerbated issue. The higher the magnification you're trying to push is, but you were noticing it even on a 4-power optic.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd like you to just take, a minute or two to talk about is how you deal with that and any techniques that you might utilize to help mitigate the effects of mirage. It's something we've talked about on other episodes of how impactful it can be. Mm-hmm. Thinking the Mark 12 Speedway run, for example. And so in an environment where you don't have the ability to just let the rifle cool down to eliminate the issues of mirage, where you're actually using it, what techniques, if any, can you really utilize to help combat it?
So I think one thing that now, Josh, at this point, we've shot a fair amount of long stroke piston systems. And I feel that's one thing that we could draw a similarity between all of them. The AKs, the SG 550s, and now the SIG 556 all heat up very fast. Like, faster than the direct impingements or internal pistons, faster than M4s.
Yes.
And I think more so I've noticed it when we do speedway runs, which there is a 5.5 series speedway run coming up at some point. And whenever we're shooting these things, either up close with really long strings or speedway runs, or even this was not a fast run. This was a very meticulous, calculated run, but I still saw the barrel cook. I still saw either the gas system or the barrel cook. And And I've seen the same thing.
It was
with
fairly
AKs.
early too, Henry. It was
Yeah.
early. It was at like 350 or something.
Yeah.
It was not like deep into the run.
Yeah. That's something I think it's just a part of that the operating system. At this point, it seems, we could postulate that the long stroke gas piston system, for some reason, just cooks in the front. And I don't know why it would. I know that any gas system, it traps a lot of gas around the gas block, more so than your DI internal piston systems. But, in this instance, we just see it happening so soon. And the only way is kind of just for me anyways, to ride it out. Unless you have like a Mirage band or something to shield the front, then you'll be all right. If it's coming from the suppressor like the Mark 12 was, then if you use a suppressor wrap, it'll give you maybe like 10, 20 more rounds, but that's it. Mm-hmm. But that's either cooling, like take your pick on the liquid that you want to dash onto it, I suppose, and a Mirage band or a suppressor wrap. I think those are really the only ways. But then if you use a suppressor wrap, then that cuts both ways. Because then you're trapping the heat. So, system.
So maybe where we ultimately chalk that up is that, to your point, an inherent disadvantage of that operating system is not just that it gets harder to hold when you're shooting strings up close, not just that you have to wear a glove when you're shooting, or working with the firearm to really be able to use it seriously in any way, but that it's like an inherent disadvantage in your ability to shoot it at distance as well. And in spite of all that, it's still exceptionally effective. It doesn't degrade the rifle's base accuracy per se.
Now, I will say
your ability to aim the rifle.
I will say though, while that is true, that the heat, in correlation to your aiming solution, there is a negative correlation there. This particular long stroke gas piston system feels like a gas checked AK. Like it's a sort of a slower run on the bolt, and then I don't know if that's exactly it, but the recoil is significantly lower than some of your ARs, to where it's just like a pop into your shoulder. This is like rop. It just racks in and out. That whole sensation is very similar to the Swiss 5.5 series. But at the same time, unlike AKs too, the AKs, you have to wear a glove like you were saying, but this you don't have to wear a glove, because this type of a rail system or the Swiss handguard, it wraps around the entire critical components in the front enough and insulates it enough to where you don't run into your hands actually burning from touching like the little side of the clips for the top handguard or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
As far as a rifle, comparing it to the AK, like, yes, you still have the negative of the heat, but you still have, if you have it gassed correctly, which AKs are all over gas, this is gassed correctly, you have a very low and pleasant recoil sensation. And then this one, as opposed to an AK, you also have a better gripping solution, and also it's easier to run rails. So if you were to tie in any light lasers or anything along those lines, this is also an easier system to do that, as opposed to an AK. On top of that, you don't have to rely on a side rail, and you have a top rail to mount any NATO optics as you'd like. And of course, the good looks.
Well, there you go, guys. There you have it, right from Henry's mouth. The SIG 5.56 is better than all AKs. Now, I just want to go ahead and say, make sure you comment and let Henry know your thoughts on that particular line that he has so eloquently placed for you. Make sure to do all of the normal YouTube stuff, like and subscribe, and be sure to check us out over on the podcast channel. That's 9 Hole Podcasts. And until next time, we'll see you on the range.
Several 716, this is 096, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
096, this is 716, roger, over. 091, 1 pack, green, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
16, 2, 1 Victor, 2 packs, Redcon 1, over.